and then we'll start. Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're gonna get started in just about a minute. Just want to let people trickle in. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Youth Leadership webinar series. Today's webinar is called Creating Sustainable Community Partnerships, and our presenter is Alicia Rojas Harrison. We are so excited to have her. I think this is going to be such an awesome webinar, and thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Shira Collings. I'm NEC's grant coordinator, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Before we get started, we're just going to go over some housekeeping slides, and then I'll turn it over to Alicia. So just as a disclaimer, this webinar was developed in part under a grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, the Department of Health and Human Services. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Closed captioning for this webinar is available. Click on the CC or more to view closed captioning, and you can also view the entire transcript of the meeting by clicking on Show Transcript. And this webinar will be recorded. The recording will be posted to the National Empowerment website at power2u.org. That's power, the number 2, the letter u.org. If you do not wish to be seen on the recording, you are welcome to turn off your camera. And we will be sending out the link to the recording to everyone who's registered for the webinar. At the end of the webinar, we're going to have a Q&A session. You're invited to ask questions at any time through the chat function. We'll do our best to answer all questions. If we do not answer your question, you're welcome to email us at info4@power2u.org. and we'll do our best to get back to you. And you're also welcome to make comments using the chat function. We want this to be an interactive community space, so you're welcome to chat, to introduce yourselves, share where you're coming from, and that way we can kind of have that interaction. So I now want to introduce our awesome presenter. Alicia Rojas Harrison has lived an educational experience with trauma and resilience. A youth development professional at heart, her vision is to create healing and resilient communities through advocacy, education, and empowerment. She is the founder of Luminary Productions, LLC, providing access to trauma-informed training for community leaders, educators, and adolescents. Alicia also founded Helen's House in honor of her grandmother to specifically address the youth mental health crisis. She lives in Massachusetts with her husband of 20 years, their 2 boys, and their psychiatric support animal, Jarvis. So I'm now going to turn it over to Alicia. I'm going to stop sharing. And thank you again for presenting, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Shara. I appreciate that. And Jarvis is right there. He's waiting for our little ones to get home from school. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and we can get started. So again, my name is Alicia, and we are here for creating sustainable community partnerships, and welcome. During our time together today, I appreciate if we can have a brave space for everybody. This is an invitation to Brave Space. You can find this at thepeoplesupper.org. Together, we will create brave space because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world We all carry scars, and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. So, what I would like for us to do as we get started with everything is for you to do some self reflection from either your individual or community partnership experience on what your hopes and fears are. What are your hopes about creating partnerships? What are your fears about creating partnerships? And if you want to share those in the chat, you're more than welcome to do so. I do like to present a practical approach. So I want to dedicate as much time at the end of this webinar to allow for you to implement and put some thoughts into place in plans for yourself, which are the handouts that Shira had sent you earlier this week. So if you want to jot those down, again, what are your hopes and fears for either creating or sustaining community partnerships? And here's what we're going to do today. We're going to learn about adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. We're going to learn the pillars of a good partnership. And like I discussed just now, we're going to draft an individual and or organizational values proposition to align values with partnership and engagement. And then also utilize a mission model canvas to identify partners, resources, activities, and beneficiaries. So, what are adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs? Essentially, there are three realms of ACEs. The first realm is the household. So, typically, this is where we hear the most about ACEs, and typically where the ACE study has done the most research, including whether you've been exposed to divorce, incarcerated family member, homelessness, parent mental health, physical, emotional neglect, alcoholism and drug abuse, emotional and sexual abuse, bullying, domestic violence, and or maternal depression. And we know that these household ACEs that have been talked about the most have a significant impact on our development as youth. From a community standpoint, we want to look also at the community ACEs, or adverse experiences, which we will get more into on the next slide. And then thirdly, there is the climate or environment that is around us that also can create ACEs, or adverse experiences. And the biggest thing to take away from this slide is, although we are identifying adverse childhood and community experiences, they are not a death sentence. It is simply being authentic with the truth, and that these things impact our lives. These things impact the people we serve. These things impact our community, and we need to be aware of them. So, specifically, the community ACEs: discrimination, substandard schools, historical trauma, lack of jobs, substandard wages, violence, structural racism, poverty, food scarcity, lack of social capital and mobility, poor water and air quality, poor housing quality, and affordability. I would also like to share, just on a personal note, how these community ACEs can impact generations, right? So, the area of Ohio that I'm from is a very rural area. And although not racially diverse, still experienced a lot of these community ACEs. There was actually a factory that was dumping into the river, which causes all the residents in the area to have an increased probability of cancer, which runs rampant in my hometown. The closest grocery store is about 15 to 20 miles away, so they do not have access to fresh fruits or high quality drinking water. There is a Subway though, so they could eat fresh there. No pun intended and no sponsorship given. But there's 5 gas stations because it's along a high traffic area, which also pollutes the air. Poverty runs rampant there also. Um, but it's, knowing those things allows for others, community partnerships to be developed so that we can
No,
not
yeah,
let that be a challenge that prevents them from growing and
but
developing.
now they do.
So another thing that we know is that trauma can have a severe impact on development of us as people and also partnerships. Okay. So a lot of these slides you're going to see, you've probably seen in regards to personal development or being trauma resilience focused. And I'm going to take these slides and apply them to communities. So just like people, communities experience trauma. And if you are not aware of the historical trauma that has, or the community adverse community experiences that have happened in the community you're serving, then you're doing yourself a disservice, in my opinion. So, one of the things that would be very helpful is for you to become trauma aware. That is making sure that you know what the history is, what the collective of partnerships that have worked together or not worked together, being aware of what those community adverse community experiences are, so that you can know. Being trauma aware doesn't mean you act on it yet. It means that you're aware. And as you work up this mountain, because it is indeed a mountain, let's be quite honest, we become trauma informed and positive adverse childhood and community experiences informed and healing center, and then we can move towards the just society that we're really trying to accomplish through all of our hard work and partnerships. So what is a partnership? Glad you asked. So a partnership is a group of organizations with a common interest who agree to work together towards a common goal. Partnerships can be community based, they can be faith based, and they can be government based. And what we want to talk about today are the pillars of good partnership. And I will have a link in the slides. I will link the slide presentation at the conclusion. And part of the slide presentation does have a resource slide that includes the links to the resources I'm using. And I am using the pillars of good partnership from one of those resources. So the first pillar, do your homework, create equity, commit to transparency, and lastly, build and maintain trust. So when doing your homework, what do you want to know? And I skipped over to this slide really briefly. And you see what it is. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And like I said earlier, there's going to be some references here that we have applied to individuals. And now I hope that we can expand our thinking and apply them to communities as well. So just like individuals, communities have a hierarchy of needs. If a community is not getting their needs met, then what is the relevance of your partnership? What does it need to address? If you have this very grand idea with other community partners that you're going to create this workforce development program that's going to help end poverty, generational poverty for all the youth between the ages of 16 and 21, fantastic. I really hope that works for you. However, if those members of your project are not feeling safe, if they don't have access to quality food and water, if they don't have shelter, if they don't have food or sleep or clothing, they are not going to show up to your program that has all the greatest intentions and do what you need them to do, just like individuals. So I highly encourage you that when you do create your partnerships, that you start at the bottom of the pyramid and work your way up in regards to how you're serving your community. And again, going back to being trauma aware, what does your community need? And how does your partnership with these agencies or partnerships with individuals or faith based or whatever the case may be help you meet the needs of the community where they are now? How do we create equity? Great question, especially with a lot of different things going on. So, on an individual level, we talk about equity based on your ability to be resilient. So, the seven C's of resilience is very common. Um, we build on each one. So, control, competence, coping, contribution, character, connection, and confidence. Again, this into a community model. If you're creating a sustainable community partnership, you also need to ensure your community has these seven C's of resilience. How will the partnership be maintained and sustained and controlled? What buy in does the community have to even participate or engage in your partnership? How will communities build competence and contribute based on their lived experience? How are they compensated for their contributions? How will they cope after a traumatic event? What type of community partner do you want to be? And are you ensuring that you're being trauma aware? Are you ensuring that you're not going into a community, starting a partnership that lasts for 1 to 3 years, and then you're leaving, and that community now has a void that's created by you, which again creates an adverse community experience. How do we foster transparency and community engagement? We hear about this all the time as individuals. Do you have a fixed mindset or do you have a growth mindset? And the same can be applicable to the communities you serve and the partnerships that you build with others. Organizations, communities can have a fixed mindset because of their lived experience. If they don't have the skills or don't feel like they're able to do the things you're asking them to do, if they feel it's too challenging or that it requires too much effort, they get defensive when you ask them for feedback. If they get discouraged because they're not where they want to be, or whatever the case may be, they're in this fixed mindset. And regardless of what you're trying to accomplish with your partnership, until we can move the needle from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, that partnership is not going to be sustainable. In a growth mindset, sustainable partnerships, we ask the hard questions up front and we provide transparency while setting goals and expectations for growth that meets the needs of the community. So I would invite you to ask yourself, what are your intentions? Being transparent even about the financial situation, because that can be a setback if people don't feel like they're being compensated fairly for their time. Or the example I gave earlier, you're just going to use them for 1 to 3 years and then leave them stranded. That's not a good sustainable partnership with the community. So to move to that growth mindset, you know, we have to be able to look at ourselves as agencies that want to partner with in our communities, and how can we help to decrease the wall that can exist between fixed mindset and growth mindset. How do we build and maintain trust and equity to create sustainability? I hope you love this as much as I do. It's the 4 agreements. Individually, I have read this book by Don Miguel Ruiz multiple times. And I invite you to consider taking the values that are given in the agreements that he discusses into the realm of your partnerships. Are you being impeccable with your word? Do you speak with integrity? Do people trust you? Do you talk about your other partners behind their backs? Do you talk and belittle the community members themselves because they're not at the caliber that you think they should be, et cetera, et cetera? Your words matter. And my hope for you and your partnerships is that you speak truth and love in what you do as you develop your partnership sustainably. Don't take it personal. It's hard. I know it is to not take things personally because you're putting so much work into developing this partnership and you want nothing else but for it to succeed. However, nothing others do is because of you. And being trauma aware is going to help you with that because you're going to know that some other people's actions is a projection of their own reality, what they have experienced. So, although we're not immune, to the feelings, we are human beings who have feelings and emotions, and that's okay. But it's not personal. And that's probably, in my opinion, one of the hardest agreements to live by. And don't make assumptions. If you hear another community partner or one of the agencies you're partnering with is out talking to somebody else about some grant money, it's okay. Don't make assumptions that they're doing things behind your back. Don't make assumptions that they're, trying to get more money than you or compete against you or go off into their own little whatever the case may be, or whatever overthinking or narratives that you create in your mind about what they are doing. First of all, it's none of your business because they can do what they want and we can't control the actions of others. So I invite you to not make assumptions. Ask the questions. Be transparent. Share your feelings. When you do this, I feel. When you do this, we as a community or we as an agency feel this. The more that we let it lie and fester, it's not going to be good for anybody. And ultimately, the people who are going to pay the most are the communities you're serving. So that agreement applies to our partnerships so very much. And last but not least, always do your best. Um, Sometimes our best is not what we think our best should be. Sometimes we submit 50 grant applications and we gave the very best narratives and breakdowns and timelines that we think are going to get us the funding that we need to make the impact we want in our communities. You did your best. That's all you can ask for. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I am so excited to get started with my day. I have 2 boys, school age. I'm married. I have my own stuff. I run a business and a nonprofit. My best is not going to be my best all the time. I have very high expectations of myself. So do the best you can and reassure yourself and provide yourself with those internal narratives that help you get through those moments. Again, the 7 C's of resilience. How do you cope? How do you take control? How do you contribute? All of those things are helpful on, like I said, on both an individual and a community level. And relationships matter. At the end of the day, if you don't have relationship, you don't have anything, in my opinion. And I do have when you look at the slide, this does go to a video. And I apologize. I'm kind of nervous to share it because we didn't test it before we started and I don't want to mess up the webinar. Um, but I hope you can agree that without relationships, we don't serve. As a servant, I self-identify as a servant leader. And if I don't have relationships with members of my community, with the agencies I want to work with the families, with the police, with the schools, then what I want to accomplish with my business and nonprofit is not going to happen. And that's where relationships come in. And relationships are hard. Building a network is hard. Start small. Well, who is close by? Who do you already connect with in your communities? Those are going to be really great starting points for you. And those connections can mean the world once you get started with whatever partnership you want to move forward with, taking into consideration the community needs. You can band together groups of people based off community needs, and you can find them. I know you can. So let's move into some work. Let's get our brains moving in regards to how we can put this into action. I hope your brains are moving. I hope this has been helpful for you. So let's talk about it. If you do have the handouts, if you want to work on that, that's fantastic. If not, I am going to share what it looks like and we're going to go through it together. So a value proposition canvas looks like this. And essentially, this is from Strategizer. And essentially, we're working to identify what the pains and gains are in our community. What is really, their challenge? And based off of those, what can we do to relieve those pains? What products and services can we provide? And then what can increase the gains? The example I gave earlier was your workforce development program. Fantastic idea. Will address multiple adverse community experiences. However, if your participants don't have their basic needs met, your program is going to fail. So if we look at that as an example, we create a value proposition for a workforce development program. Our gains will be decrease in poverty, access to food, access to healthy food, access to clothing, whatever the case may be. Because the pains are the opposite of that, right? They don't have access to quality food. They don't have a safe environment. They don't have reliable shelter. And then what jobs can be created from those things? Because again, we're going back to what is the impact that we can have to create sustainability. And we apply that to the triangle. Good grief. The square. I am going back to first grade math. The square. And what products and services are we going to address? With our workforce development program, the first thing we need to address are the gains we want to accomplish. So that can be through a farmer's market. That can be through, food distribution. That can be through any other food pantry or soup kitchens that maybe are accessible in your community. It can also look like partnerships with community shelters or faith-based organizations that might be able to provide donated jackets, sanitary items, etc. And then from there, what gains are we creating? Well, once we can see the impact of the basic needs being met for this group, then we can up the ante a little bit and create some gains in there, maybe resume building, maybe just getting them to meet on a regular basis to discuss what it even looks like for them to work. The options are endless. And the pain relievers are the things that are going to relieve the pains that's being caused. So the food, all those things. If you have any questions about this, feel free to put them in the chat. And after the presentation, we can definitely address those. So what is a mission model canvas? So this is what a mission model canvas looks like, again, from Strategizer. So as a nonprofit agency or in a partnership or as a partner that's either faith-based, government-based, or community-based, we need to identify who the key partners are for our value proposition. So we put this beautiful values proposition together. We are going to impact our community in a very sustainable way in our brain. This is where we put it into action. So, based on your values proposition, who are the key partners you need to reach out to? Even if you don't have a partnership with them yet, who are they? Identify them. If you know somebody that works there, perfect. If you know someone that serves there, even better. If you just know the name of a person, that is perfectly fine as well. What are the key activities that you need to do in order to move the needle? What resources do you need besides money? People are going to be your most valuable resource. We can't do anything without funding. I understand that. And that is what it is. But people are going to be your best resources. The return on investment of volunteers who are capable of fulfilling your mission, a proper board of directors, individual community members, the resource that they can provide is going to be just so much value to you. Again, restating your value propositions based on the previous handouts. How do you get buy-in and support? How are you going to deploy it? And who is going to benefit? And trust me when I tell you that when you put this together, keep it simple. We all want to change the world, or we wouldn't be on this call right now. We all want to make a difference. And also, we have to start small. So, taking the example again of the workforce development program, the original age group that I said was 16 to 21. Fantastic. Maybe I can narrow that down a little bit. Maybe I can focus on high school seniors and juniors. Maybe I can focus on that group of teens that goes to the youth center. Maybe I can just focus on um, the food drives and the clothing drives and things like that that will benefit that group, for example. You have to know how much your budget is and how much it's going to cost. You have to. It's a necessary evil that most of us don't enjoy. I don't like asking for money. And also, I can't do my job without it. And I believe that probably speaks to all of us. So, having a budget is essential. It's even better when you can itemize that budget to the best of your ability. So, the likelihood of you getting funding for an itemized budget that goes into detail that shows that you have the capability of managing projects, of managing details, of managing a proper budget versus you just making a budget that says, for example, salaries, $100,000, supplies, $50,000, total $150,000. That's great. And also, anybody can write that. It doesn't show your skills and abilities as a partner to minimize what the budget is. And then lastly, your mission achievement and impact factors. We've all heard of SMART goals. We've all heard of return on investment. If you haven't, that's fine. But these are where we want to focus our attention when we talk about impact factors, and to be specific as possible. We're going to end generational poverty. I love that. I worked at a Boys and Girls Club who now serves on that, and they are making it happen. And I'm so grateful to have been part of their team when that first started. But you can't just say end generational poverty. You have to break it down into actionable items. and the impact you're actually going to have as you go through that process, because that is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that's going to happen in 5 years. This is a commitment to our communities that we are going to address this need. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get through it at the end. So before we move into Q&A and answering any questions that you have, I ask and invite you to do a reflection. You know, this is a traffic light reflection. It's used a lot. What is one thing you will stop? So in the mindset of community partnerships, based on your own experience with community partnerships, or your own experience as you rev up the courage to embark on community partnerships, what is one thing you will stop? Does not have to be, this can be something that is either individual or organizational. It's totally up to you. But what is one thing you will stop? What is one thing you will continue? That's the yellow light. And then what is one thing you will start? Again, from an individual and or organizational level, what is one thing you can start? And if you want to start having, building up your courage and you want to share your reflection answers in the chat, you're more than welcome to do that also. So this is the resource page I spoke about. So when you get the link to the slides, you can actually click on all of these 5 resources so that you can access more in-depth information about the pillars of partnership, strategizer, the positive, adverse community, childhood and community experiences, community engagement, and family services. This is my contact information, my email address, my phone number, my LinkedIn page. You can find me at Alicia Rojas Harrison. I'm also on Facebook. And yeah, I am going to stop sharing my screen. Oh my gosh, look at all these people. Hello. My video was being kind of choppy earlier. I'm going to give it a try now. How is that?
I think that works.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I really appreciate this. This was just awesome. I love the questions that you asked at the end. And since we do have some time, I was wondering, would you like to invite people to unmute and maybe share some of their responses?
Absolutely. I welcome engagement.
You're welcome to raise your hand and I can unmute people and give you a chance to share your answers if you'd like to.
Also a lot to process, I know. A question I've seen. Oh, do you want to go over the question, Shira? I'm sorry.
Sure. So yeah, I can go ahead and start asking some of the questions, and if people want to share their responses as well, feel free to do that. Feel free to raise your hand using the raise hand function, and I will definitely unmute you. So yeah, one question that we have says, I had a question on how one defines competence when what we were working on is changing. Is when what we were working on changing is in flux. What are the goals we have to do? What are the goals we have to do with what will embrace emergence?
Wow, thank you for your question. And the storm we've been in with COVID and the ever lasting influx it seems to have on everything. I mean, there's so many things in our climate that can impact that, right? So it's a very valid question. How do we measure competence? In my opinion, we measure competence by, Maya Angelou always says, when you know better, you do better. And that's how I measure competence. When I know better, I do better. When my community partners know better, they do better. Um, that can look like a lot of different things, but again, I would invite you to use, that hierarchy of needs to see where your partner or whoever you're asking about the competence question, where they are. Why aren't they getting a job? That's a great question. Do they even know how to do a resume? Do they even have the transportation to get to a job? Do they have childcare? Do they have children? Do they have access to work in regards to being either a citizen or legally present in the country, wherever your country lies? Because I know that this can be a global experience. There's a lot of barriers in how, and as community partners, we have to figure out what those barriers are and how we can educate and advocate for them so that we can give them more competency. And sometimes that's even going to policymakers and asking, what is this? And how can I better understand it so that I can help my community? I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much. I think that was a great answer. And I did just want to share, we're getting so much positive feedback. So
Oh, yay. Thanks.
your webinar is so appreciated. So we have another question. What is Strategizer?
Strategizer is a website. So, strategizer.com is a website that I was exposed to during my program with E for All. And basically, it provides, both profit, for profit, and non for profit advice, access to like the two handouts that that you have now, based on what you're trying to accomplish, in hopes that creating successful entrepreneurship, and creating successful agencies. So if you go to that website, again, I'm not sponsored by them. Did they not give me money? It's been a helpful tool for me as I've navigated my own experience. So I just wanted to have that part of my presentation. um, it's the handouts I have downloaded for them are free and accessible, which I also find helpful.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Sounds really helpful. We do have another question. Can you review the key activities and value propositions in the mission model canvas?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Which one do we want to start with? I can start with the values proposition. So can you repeat the question again, Shira? So I can make this a really long answer, but I don't want to if I don't need to.
Sure. It's can you review the key activities and value propositions in the mission model canvas? And we do have plenty of time, so you're welcome to
Mhm.
take the time you need.
Okay, thank you. So when I look at the value proposition canvas, I like to start on the right hand side. So I start in the circle. And so the gains are what you want to accomplish. What are the gains from your partnership? What are the gains from that will happen in your community? Kind of think of the phrase "no pain, no gain," although in a community sense that doesn't it's not very positive. But the pains are identifying what those community experiences are that need to be addressed. So, the examples of the pains could be transportation. I live in a town now, for example, that has very limited public transportation. Um, and I'm also like 45 minutes outside of Boston. So if I needed to go to Boston, for example, for a job or for a service or whatever the case may be, that's a pain for me. Number one, I don't like traffic. Number two, maybe I don't have a car. I can tell you there's definitely not a bus service that goes from my town to Boston. You could go the 15 miles to the T and take the train if you're capable of getting to the train station. Even Ubers or Lyfts or cabs are not in this
Your
town
Monday night group didn't even need me.
in an accessible way. So that's a pain. And if I, for example, I focus a lot on youth mental health. So if I am a youth who found a trauma support group for my anxiety in Boston, I can't get there. So as a community partnership, what can you do to help that 16-year-old with anxiety get to their anxiety group in Boston? Is that you creating an anxiety group in your town so they don't have to go, you know, it can take you in upwards of 2.5 hours to get from my town to Boston and back. You're talking about a 16-year-old who has school, hopefully. So that's the pain. I'm the 16-year-old that needs access to this group. That's a pain I want to address. What can I gain? What are the gains? What are the gains from addressing that pain? Well, if I address that pain, then maybe that 16-year-old doesn't drop out of school. Maybe that 16-year-old doesn't commit suicide. Maybe that 16-year-old can get a job that supports their family. That's a gain. The customer jobs piece is where you're connecting your pains with your gains. So maybe it's you're providing a transportation service, but you need drivers. That could be a job. Maybe you need to track who needs this service. Those are jobs. Those are people resources that you need. And also the community is getting, access to those jobs, right? Because jobs help reduce poverty. And then when we move over to the square, which I called a triangle earlier, from what you know about the pains, the gains, and the jobs, what pain are you relieving? By being like, for example, the 16-year-old access to the group. Maybe you decide that you're providing transportation. Great. So your pain reliever is providing transportation. You'll see the arrows actually come together in the middle. It's not one moves into another. The diagram shows where these things meet in the middle. So the pain reliever is you're providing transportation, which means this kiddo can get to their anxiety group, which means that they can hopefully get the support they need to stay in school, to develop coping skills, to develop competence, to do these things they need to do to build their resilience so that they can be the best person they can be. What products and services are you offering? Correlated to the pain relievers, and also totally connected, right? That's why they're in the same square. So the products and services that you offer are the pain relievers. You're offering a bus. The transportation is the pain reliever. You're offering a virtual anxiety group for teenagers. That's a service that is relieving the pain of them needing a group all the way in Boston, as examples. And then the gain creators. So these are the things that are going to help you build and scaffold your movement forward with your partners. So your gain creators are going to be those relationships that, this 16-year-old is going to tell that 16-year-old that now there's transportation to this group. And I know that you suffer with anxiety like me, so let's go. So now your impact is spreading. You're creating relationship. You're creating trust. You're creating jobs. And those are going to lead back to the other side of gains. So now, fast forward 1 to 3 years, and you have this robust program where you're just transporting kids to Boston every day. What's next? And that's where that's why the mission model canvas is so important, because it helps you plan out how you're going to do what you want to do. So you have that great values proposition, and the mission canvas breaks it down into what you need to make it happen. So you're talking about your key partners. You're talking about what activities you're doing. So we're driving buses. Our key partners, the school, the parents. Do not reduce the importance of parent and guardian and caregiver partnerships. It's a relationship that you have to have if this is the business that you're in. We're in the human business, which means that whoever's connected to that 16-year-old needs to be connected to me. What key activities? Are we just, they're on the bus for 45 minutes. Are we going to have anybody on the bus with them? Are we going to need an advisor? Are we going to need activities on the bus? Do they need music on the bus? Like, what key activities are going to help your partnership thrive based on your values proposition? If it's not in your values proposition, it should not be on your mission canvas. We want to translate that proposition into actionable items. Key resources. Again, humans are going to be your best resource, but this allows you to document them. You can do more than one values proposition. From experience, I do not highly recommend it. As an overachiever, it is overwhelming because my ADHD kicks in and then I'm just paralyzed by all the things I want to accomplish, and that doesn't help anybody. So focus on one. If this is your first time doing this, focus on one value proposition. What buy-in and support do you need? Do you need the support of the principal of the high school? Do you need the buy-in from the police department? Do you need the buy-in from the transportation service? Do you need the buy-in from the support group that they're going to because they didn't expect somebody that's 45 minutes away to come? How do you, again, reduce those barriers? How do we move from that fixed mindset to that growth mindset to make this happen? How are you going to deploy it? You can't just show up to the kid's home and be like, hey, I'm here to take you to your group. I mean, you could, but I don't know how that would work out for you or them. Then the cops might really be involved. So, how are you gonna market it? How are you gonna brand it? Do you need a license? Like, what business licenses do you need? Do you need a vehicle to transport? Do they have to have a special license to transport youth? Do they need background checks before they can do this job? Like, there are so many things that can be put into play just for deploying a values a mission. But who's going to benefit? So obviously the kiddo who's getting their support from their group is going to benefit, but who else benefits? Right? So if that kiddo, if that teen is having, better resilience, that impacts everything around them, not just themselves. But just focusing on the impact it has for themselves, maybe they're better equipped now to have a better forecast on their life. Maybe now they're thinking about going to college or trade school or the military or find a full-time job. Maybe now they're getting their own group together at their high school because they've had so much success going to their group that they want to have something for other teens that are going through the same thing as them in their own high school. Who are the beneficiaries? Because really your beneficiaries are how we turn those adverse community experiences into positive ones. And then the very bottom to the mission, budget, and cost, I can't explain that any more than what it says. I mean, to be honest, what I would invite you to do is if you're looking specifically for funding opportunities, then look at what they're requesting as a budget. Some funding opportunities only require you to submit an overall like an overall broad budget. This is my budget. It's $80,000. Some people ask you to, again, itemize it and break it down. Some people want you to break it down into certain categories. It's really important for you to do your research so that you're not recreating the same budget in 15,000 templates and formats. Just start with the one that's going to work for the majority of your funding opportunities and be specific as you can, as it wants you to be. Funders are fickle, from my experience. As much as we like to appreciate their funding, it's, sometimes it's very difficult. And they ask for a lot of things up front, and your budget is most definitely going to be one of them. And then the mission achievements and impact factors. As it correlates to the values proposition, this will be your gain creators. So what are we gaining? What gain is being created from this? So now, instead of, one 16-year-old getting access to mental health services, if they come back and start their own group, now 10 adolescents are getting access to mental health services. Now their principal's starting a whole mental health, social emotional learning group. Now there's Wellness Wednesdays at the high school. Like, what do you want your impact to be from this partnership? And that's really what it's asking for. Like, how will you know when you celebrate an achievement? And it doesn't have to be this very grandiose achievement of, oh my gosh, we've created a community center that has all the mental health services to be able to support da 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 da. My brain goes there. Achievements can be any size that helps you stay moving forward. Maybe the achievement is you finding a board of directors. Maybe the achievement is simply finding your point of contact at an agency and actually starting the committee that's going to serve your community. Try not to get stuck on the achievement in regards to how grand it is. Try to focus it back onto your values. And that's really why it's important to have a values proposition, because we want to keep it values focused. How'd I do?
I think that was amazing. Thank you so much.
You're absolutely welcome.
It's just a wealth of helpful info in that.
It's taken me 15 years of experience to be able to have this wealth of knowledge. So I'm glad I'm able to share it.
Yes, it truly is a wealth of knowledge. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We did get some other great questions.
Okay.
As we were talking. So let me see. One was, I really like this question. How do you find the pains? Do you do a community assessment or canvassing the community, design workshops for community members to attend? What strategies do you suggest?
Oh boy, you're going to need a lot of them. A lot of options, that is, until you find the right one that's the most consistent. For me, I observe a lot of community events. I go to the football games. I go to the laundromats. I intentionally go and observe what's happening in my community. So I say that to say I educate myself first about what the hot topics seem to be based on what's the trend. We're very fortunate that we, for example, don't have a lot of overdoses in our community. However, the ones we do have increased based on the numbers from last year. Is that an alarm for me to immediately go and deploy an opioid prevention program? No. However, it is a red flag. So staying on that example, if that's a red flag for me, then I'm going to do some research on who deals with that in my community. and working with them. Well, first you got to connect with them. So let me be honest. I've been in my town now for 6 years and I'm just now making connections. So sometimes it's not easy. But yes, to all the above, putting together a survey. I found that local agencies are very willing to have the help as a volunteer. So I like to volunteer for agencies that fulfill that meet my values proposition, that align with what I want to do. So I volunteer, for example, at the youth center. And through my volunteer work, I'm then exposed to other things and to other people. My beautician, she is connected to a whole different community. And just by meeting with her every 3 months to do my hair, I get, the updates on what's going on. What's this community doing? What's that community doing? What do they need? What's the word on the street? I typically like to go with the word on the street versus what I'm been told. That's my go-to. Sometimes it gets me in trouble. And I say that because I tend to be relentless in my research. And people sometimes don't like to be called out for their discrepancies. So do your own research first. Find out what you think, based on what your values proposition is, what the needs are. Is it food? Is it shelter? Is it, start at the bottom of the pyramid and see if those things are being fulfilled. And if they're not, then that's where you start. And based off of where you start, those are the partners you need to outreach to. And you're not going to have access to a whole school district to give a survey to until you can connect the school district to your values proposition. So start small. Sometimes it's just talking. Write it down, document it, and see what trends you find on your own. And then once you develop those partnerships and you have access to other resources to do surveying and assessments, then do that. Thank you for that question. That was a great question.
Thank you so much. That was a great answer. And yes, great question. We have another question. Can you give another example of a value proposition?
What is it? Can I send some examples at the conclusion of this? Like, I feel if I'm able to put some samples together and actually just fill in the handout, maybe that would be helpful. But I want to make sure I'm doing that intentionally. So if you're okay, Shira, with sending that out, I'd be happy to fill in a couple of examples just so there's some verbiage there that can be referenced.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. I think that would be super helpful to people.
Sure.
So feel free to
Yeah.
just, and we'll send that along with the recording, the PowerPoint, the survey, and something else that I think I'm missing, but
No worries. We'll get it.
yes. Another question asks, relationships are vital. How have folks created action around that? Action items around that? Does it always have to be a physical space? Are there places that can be free of insurance concerns, of paying for physical space, helping people self-organize to act on their own values?
Oh my gosh, that's an amazing question. Thank you so much. And it really speaks to where my nonprofit Helen's House is at the moment. You're looking at the only employee, and I'm definitely not capable of taking insurance or anything like that. So one of the projects I actually have right now is called ANX-A. I need to work on the name too. ANX-A is my working name, but it stands for Anxiety Anonymous, specifically for high school students. Don't take my idea though, please. I'm joking. Please, anxiety just doesn't reside in my little town. Anxiety is everywhere. So if I can spark any type of creativity right now, then by all means run with it. So, Anxiety Anonymous, I have worked really hard to develop a relationship with our substance abuse treatment and recovery group here in town, but they're super busy caring for the adults, um, who are basically just old children who weren't provided with access to develop their 7 C's of resiliency, which is why I work with you. So their location is not going to work for me. But guess what's open 24/7? Dunkin' Donuts. Do they have to have insurance to come? Nope. You do have to sign a confidentiality agreement, though, that says that you're not going to disclose other people's information to others. And also recognize you're in a Dunkin' Donuts. So what you're saying isn't really confidential to begin with. How do I deploy that? Well, I already have a relationship with a few school officials. I already have a relationship with the director at the youth center. I have a relationship with the principal at the high school. So my deployment would be to create a flyer or a social media image that they can share through their distribution list, because I finally have access to that. And once it's deployed, I had to be able to act on it though, right? I can't tell high school teenagers to meet me at the Dunkin' Donuts on Pearl Street at 5 o'clock on a Friday and not expect for 500 teenagers to show up thinking they're getting some free dunks, right? So some planning, this is where we have to do some planning. And, that's why those canvases is really important. However, I do know I can target specific groups of teenagers. I'm a mentor for a group at the high school called Connections, who provides mentors to high school freshmen and sophomores who are first generation college students potentially. Essentially, we're trying to mentor them into whatever they want to do after high school, which is a selective process. So the school officials have already selected these members of Connections. I've been selected as a mentor. So if I want to start my first Anxiety Anonymous group for high schoolers, I'm starting with that one. So building upon what you want to do is essential. Again, I've had my nonprofit. I've lived in my town for 6 years. My nonprofit was established in 2021. It takes time. I just got a board of directors finalized to finally do the paperwork to be recognized as a 501c3 organization. So I can apply for funding. And let's be honest, all of that, when I say it out loud, sounds exhausting. And it is. And it can be. So make sure that you're taking care of yourself throughout the process and make sure that you're reaching out for help. And if your own lived experience is preventing you from doing that, you can email me. I love thought partnerships. If you need to bounce it off somebody that, to build your confidence, be happy to do. And thank you. Yeah, that's what I got for that one. I could talk forever about that one though. That's just because that's where I am in life right now with my nonprofit.
Thank you so much. That was, again, such a great answer, so helpful. And just love your idea and how you're going about meeting some needs in your community.
Thank you.
It's such important work. Let me see. I don't see any other questions in the chat. We have just a few minutes left, so I want to just give people time. If anyone else has any questions that they want to ask, feel free to put those in the chat. If anyone has a question that I somehow have missed and didn't get to, feel free to ask it again.
I'm so sorry. I think I froze there for a minute. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I was just saying, we just have a few minutes left, so I just want to give like a couple minutes for people to ask any last questions, or if I somehow did miss any questions in the chat, for people to ask those again if they'd like. I just want to,
While you're doing that, I want to show appreciation to everybody who has attended today. The fact that I look down and see 48 participants on this webinar just warms my heart. I feel really warm and fuzzy right now, and I really hope that you have gotten some valuable information from this. And I truly do mean, if you have any questions or whatever the case may be, I will make myself available via email, or through the, LinkedIn or whatever the case may be, to support you.
thank you so much.
And that was great. I really, I'm full. My heart is full.
Thank you so much. We did have just one last question. If you wanted just a couple minutes to answer, you may not have time for a full answer, but it's a really good question. What about prejudices within peer services? There are cliques and absence of elders, and some people are excluded from peer certification opportunities.
Yes, I want to acknowledge that exists. I don't feel that I have a great answer for that right now, because I'm still getting my feet wet with peer support services and really understanding how one goes about being a part of that community. So I'm still learning. What I would say is, discrimination and prejudice can happen anywhere. And that's why we do the work we do, in order to create an equitable space. So if you feel that that's a need in your community to have a more diverse peer support program, then I think that that's a good starting point for what your values proposition and your mission canvas would look like. How do we get that? Do you have to create that yourself? Do you just have to raise the alarm on it? What are the things that can be addressed? And I think that can apply across the board, because we saw that as, that is one of the adverse community experiences, is discrimination, is disparity, is, our historically marginalized groups tend to have more adverse experiences than others. And what are we doing to address that as a community?
Absolutely. I just want to share, Kim Ewing put in the chat that an implicit bias training is an option, and that is such a great idea.
And if you can get one with Ms. Kim, you would have the most amazing time while learning some great skills that, yes, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, I cannot recommend Kim's implicit bias trainings enough. So please take advantage of that.
Thank you for that, Ms. Kim. I appreciate you sharing that.
We're just getting so many great comments. Thank you for this valuable training, and that this was very informative. Oh, we have a good comment here too. Also, paid peer providers are taught at City College to cooperate with the medical model. Our movement started to protect people from abuses of psychiatry and provide alternatives. So that's definitely something important.
Thank you for sharing that.
So yeah, we do have to wrap up. I just want to thank everyone so much for being here. Thank you so much, Alicia, for this incredible webinar. Thank you, Oryx. We have our CEO, Oryx Cohen, and our new youth coordinator, Felicity Kruger, helping out behind the scenes. Thank you for the work you're doing. And we will be sending out all the materials. And we'll also let you know when our next webinar is going to be. So they'll all be added to our newsletter if you don't get that already, so that we can let you know about our next events. And Alicia will be presenting for us again. So, we'll keep you posted on when Alicia's next webinar is.
I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Me too. Thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.